In this video, we will be reviewing how to request new contracts, contract amendments, or contract terminations. To begin, for any of those three items, you'll first hover your mouse over the Forms dropdown and click the Contract Request form. Once you've clicked the Contract Request form, Coupa will automatically open the form. And in the first question, you'll identify whether this request is for a new contract, a contract amendment, or a contract termination. Depending on your answer to each of these items, Coupa will give you distinctly different questions that are required to be answered for each of the options. If I click on new contract, for example, we will have questions 1 through 10 that are required to be filled out. For this demonstration, I will continue with a new contract request. Question 2 will require that you select the property that will own the contract. In this demo, I'll select Greektown as my property. Question 3 requires you to enter the supplier that you'll be doing business with. Question 3A contains a link to the supplier onboarding process. If your supplier is not yet set up in Coupa, you must follow the link in 3A to begin and complete the onboarding process before proceeding with the contract request. Question 4 requires that you specify an owner or a requester that will own this contract. Question 5 asks that you provide a brief description of the contract and a business justification. Question 6 is asking whether or not this contract directly or indirectly affects any of the following states. This question is very critical for the requesters to fill out because it will determine whether or not a compliance review is required. The contract administrator will also be reviewing this question, so please be sure to fill this out. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your contract admin. Question 7, although not a required field, it is good to select a category that most accurately describes the good or service that you're purchasing. You can either search for it by viewing and scrolling down through the dropdown, or you can begin to type the text in the free-form text field, and Coupa will make a suggestion based on what you've typed. Question 8 contains a list of parameters that if any of them are selected, a legal review will be required. If you have any questions on the parameters listed here, or you need more information, there is a link to the contracts policy listed below. In the contracts policy, each of these items are more thoroughly reviewed and described. So if you have any additional questions, be sure to visit contracts policy. In question 9, if you've reviewed the contracts policy and you still have questions about whether or not your contract meets any of those parameters, check the box in question 9, and your contract admin has been instructed to reach out to you if this is checked so that you can both review the contract together and make a more informed decision on whether or not your contract meets any of the parameters. Finally, in question 10, this is a required field. Coupa will require that you attach a file to either represent the supplier paper that the contract will be written on or any supporting documentation. In this case, I'm going to select my supplier paper and then finally click review. Once I click review, Coupa will open up a quick summary of all the fields that I've just filled out. And all the way at the bottom, we can review the approval chain that will fire on this form. There will only be one approver required on each form, and that will be the buyer group that's associated with the form itself. The buyer group is essentially a way to notify the contract administrator that there is a request waiting for them. Once they have reviewed the form, they will then approve the form and reach out to you if they need any additional information. Once you've reviewed your form and you're comfortable with the information you've given, you can click Submit for Approval. And now this request is submitted. If you have a need to submit a contract amendment or contract termination, the process is very similar. We're going to hover over Forms and click Contract Request Form. The difference in this scenario is that instead of clicking New Contract, we're going to click either Contract Amendment or Contract Termination. The forms look very similar. All the required fields are the same. The difference from New Contract is that there's a much smaller list of fields that you will have to fill out. Specifically, you will need to fill out a contract number that will tell the contract administrator which contract you are requesting to either be amended or terminated. One final note, be sure to give a very thorough description if creating either an amendment or a termination so that you give enough information to your contract administrator of exactly what change you want to make or what the business justification is for the contract termination. Finally, once you've fully filled out your form, you'll follow the same steps as previously described for a new contract.